Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the We Build Families podcast. This podcast is designed to create a space to discuss family issues, day-to-day life issues that many times we don't always have an opportunity to talk about. Again, it is our aim and goal to make sure that we construct a family unit that can weather any type of storm, any type of problem that we may face. Again, my name is Pastor B, and I have with me today a very good friend of mine, Minister Derek Thomas. Today, we're going to be talking about teen depression and suicide, and he works with at-risk youth in the community. And so we're just going to have a conversation about, handling with teen suicide and depression and what signs to look for and how we can help our kids, how we can learn from them so that we can make, a stronger unit. My brother Derek, how you doing, man?
What's going on, brother? How's everything?
Everything is everything, sir. Thank you again for accepting the invite for this podcast. So again, we want to talk about teen suicide and teen depression. I know that over the last couple of years, we've seen a large increase in teen suicides and teen depression. And sadly, it's actually starting earlier than the technical teenage years. So I guess just to start, what are the warning signs, or how do I know if I have a teen that has suicidal thoughts or is dealing with depression?
It's got a couple of things. And some of the things to be looking at or be concerned about is a child's temperament. If it shifts a lot, if a child, small distinctive changes in behavior.
Mm-hmm.
If a child was once talkative and now totally shut down, it's one. If one that was interacting with the family a lot, they shut down or they distance themselves. A lot of times you could tell if the parents are not so active in their own life, they don't see a different shift in their child. If a child starts talking a lot of negativity or a lack of self-worth, some of those things come into place. And some of them, in some certain cases, some kids do the complete opposite because they don't want to share.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it's very unique to kind of figure out if there's something wrong with my child, if they're dealing with something, if there's a pressure on them that they want to deal with and not talk about. School is not in, but school for most kids was a major, major issue when it came to suicidal thoughts and feeling some type of way and depression.
Yeah.
Because kids are under a great amount of pressure these days and times. Believe it or not, they have a lot of pressure. I mean, we may have had some pressure as kids, but they have a great amount of pressure because of social media, because of culture, because of television, just with either belonging, with body issues, with image issues. So it's a multitude of things that our kids can be affected by. But some of the easier ways, it's just a shift in behavior.
Got it. So it's important, first of all, to pay attention. Pay attention and not ignore those warning signs. I know a lot of times parents, and you mentioned it, sometimes are busy, handling life, taking care of the home. And so it's easy sometimes to see a change or notice something, but not address it because you think, they'll get over it, or, they're just having a bad day. But what you're saying is, if you see something, say something, try to have a conversation, at least start the conversation. Because I know many times as an adult, if I'm depressed, I don't want to talk to anybody about it. But you said that it's important just to pay attention to what your kids are going through. Good deal. Good deal.
It's pretty significant to pay attention to detail when it comes to your kids. because kids and parents already have an invisible division line
Hmm.
that separates them from one another, because most kids feel, oh, my mom or dad wouldn't understand, or, they're too busy, or if I do explain it to them, they'll never get where I'm going with it.
Got
And
it.
so there is a thin line that's really separating parents from child, or child from parent, that makes this difficult, because it's a parents sometimes may feel, well, I don't want to be a friend to my child. No, you're actually being a concerned parent. And then sometimes when we ask, and when we do notice that there's a shift in the child's behavior, sometimes the one question, are you okay, or is there something wrong, will never be enough. Because sometimes we're really quick, once we ask that question and the child says, I'm okay, and never really sharing a lot about what the deal is, then that child goes right back into that depressive state, because the right amount of attention was never given to. And we cannot take for granted that our children are going to be okay, because that's the very wrong thing to do in this day, because our kids have access to multiple things, and those things are easily accessible when it comes to our kids. So, and the other thing that I think that our parents or adults may not understand is that our kids want to feel important too. So that's pretty significant. And a parent, as much as possible, and I'm never just trying to put things solely on the parent, but if we're talking about teen suicide and depression, then we have to make sure that the parent has enough activity in that child's life and day that they feel loved, in regards to what they're battling with outside, if the outside is the problem. And that's a whole other ball of wax.
Sure. So you mentioned social media. You mentioned culture. Let's kind of talk about that for a moment. What do you think, or how does social media create a place for a depressed person to live in, to kind of escape to? What role do you think social media plays in this suicide and depression that we see?
Basically image. What's been shown, what's been portrayed. If it's a body image issue, if it's a body image issue, or if it's trauma. Trauma is another thing, and let's just make it very simple. Everybody has a cell phone.
Yeah.
So if the child made a mistake in its video, it is now publicized to the world, and then that child feels like there is all eyes are on them, and that creates a whole nother great amount of pressure that can overwhelm them to a place where they don't want to go to school, they don't want to leave the house, they don't feel comfortable in their own skin, they can't do anything right. It creates a mountain of issues to cause that. Because I know when I was a kid, I didn't have social media.
Right.
So things, if something happened, a handful of people would know about it, but not the whole world, not the neighborhood. Maybe some people at the school, but it would die off. But things get repeated, so it's easier for kids to be influenced, to be hurt by things they see. Because if a young lady is fighting with trying to be pretty and popular, and she doesn't see herself as pretty and popular, and Instagram is posting this, and Facebook is posting this, and the constant scroll of these images that I'm not, and if I'm not being reaffirmed at home that you're beautiful, social media doesn't designate who you are, or you're gorgeous, or not just an outside image issue. It could be an intelligence issue, that I hear or see someone I feel that's smarter than me. This or that issue. Oh, I'm battling this issue on my own. It's multitudes of things. There are underlying mental health issues that we haven't addressed. Let's be honest. Some levels of depression is mental health.
Absolutely.
Let's make that exceptionally clear. And just an important cue to families If you don't know what to do about your child's issue, if you find out that they're struggling with, if they're revealing information, if they're not revealing information, it's important to seek help. I definitely, if we go any further, I definitely want to make mention of that, and I'll go back into it later, but always seek help. But to readdress what you mentioned, social media as far as intellect, image, and trauma, well, the three major things that they constantly come in contact with when involve social media.
Got it. Good stuff. Good stuff. So as a community, African American community, there is a stigma against depression.
Right.
And we try to hush things up when it comes to suicidal thoughts and things like that. What you're stating is really one of the reasons why I started this podcast, is to understand that as parents, as children, each one of us plays an important role in the health of each other. If we are so focused on pursuits outside of the home that we don't slow down long enough to talk to our kids, to ask those difficult questions, then we're not caught by surprise. Now, I've seen some situations to where you have kids who appear to be fine.
Right.
And they feel, like you mentioned earlier, that my parents don't have, or they wouldn't understand, what I'm going through. How can, as parents, if they've made the attempts to reach out to their kids and there's no change in behavior, or it doesn't seem like there's any progress, what resources can parents use to kind of, help their kids?
Okay. You said a lot of stuff, and you really hit on something that I was about to mention earlier, so
Okay.
I appreciate it. Want to just encourage everybody to know, never tell somebody, you'll be fine. Because most people that are struggling may not know or don't have the tools to get over.
Yeah.
So it's important enough to know if somebody's struggling with it, it's a walk with, not a leave alone situation. Because you leave alone, that's damaging. And sometimes the walk could, and I'm gonna say this, and hopefully some people are open to it. Sometimes people need a love day.
Say that again.
Some people need a love day.
Love day. Got it.
Yeah. Where I'm feeling love, not based upon what's everywhere else, but at least the place that I live, I feel that way. Because let's flip the script. What if you were an adult with depression or suicidal thoughts, and your answer to me, if I decide to open up to you, you tell me, okay, you'll be okay, and not address where I am.
Yeah.
And you basically tell me that I'm not important enough to put the time into. So sometimes we have to flip the script and imagine ourselves in our kids' shoes, in order for us to really have an empathetic attitude to be effective with our own kids. Because that within itself, honestly, is a huge help.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, well, I don't know how to handle and it may be right, because some people hopefully I don't chop heads. Sometimes people don't know how to love their way through the pain, and it becomes a problem. And so in that case, it's important that they seek mental health.
And I don't mean to cut you off, but that's very, very key that you say that, because most people either didn't experience that, or just their frame of reference when it comes to love may be slightly inadequate to the situation.
Right.
And so that's why and you're probably going to say this, but that's why, a trained professional is needed if you can honestly say, well, I'm not really sure how to handle this.
Right, right. And the greatest step to conquering something is to admit where you're weak at.
Yeah.
In order for you to get the proper help, because anytime you tell somebody I can handle it and you don't have the tools to handle it, you're causing more damage than you think you are without getting the proper help. So you're correct about, stuff. But if a child is depressed, the parent will have to come a little bit more active in that child's life when counseling comes into place. So when counseling leaves, the parent has enough tools in order to effectively assist their child with conquering and overcoming, what they need to overcome with depression, with suicidal thoughts. And when, let me say this, when a child lets you know that they don't value their lives, it's important to create a safe space for them and remove things out of their view that they won't use to make the act.
Sure.
So you don't give them the ammunition to harm themselves. It's a very important task to do that, because you're creating a place of safety to redirect their attention, and you're also removing the things out of their attention that can also draw them to the thing that they want to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a lesson that I've learned recently, is sometimes we have to do things that hurt those that are going through to save them.
Right.
And we can't be afraid to make those hard choices. We can't be afraid to do, or we can't even be afraid to create a more volatile situation in order to save them from themselves. Because, at the end of the day, we want you to be okay. We want you to get the necessary help because we're doing it out of love. And so that's really, really great. Really great point. So I guess to kind of summarize, if we have children, if we know of young people who are dealing with teen depression, dealing with suicide, what are some of the keys or practical takeaways? You've given a lot of nuggets today, but what are any other additional keys that you feel that parents and teenagers need to know regarding this situation?
Any event that you know somebody that's dealing with depression, because there is great different levels of it. So anytime you know somebody with that suicide, anybody with suicidal thoughts, get them help ASAP. That's not something that you need to put off tomorrow, because tomorrow is too late. Make sure when you find that out is that you're calling. I would call a hospital. Willis Knighton is good. Willie K. South, if I'm not mistaken, has a department geared towards that. Some things may have changed. I know LSU is also well. I know Brentwood is also well. Those are very important places in the event as far as suicidal thoughts are concerned. And again, make sure that you talk, when you find that out, see if the person has a plan. Always ask, well, what do you think and I know that may seem crazy, but if they have a plan, then they're extremely severe. Because and there's so many things that people can say. Let me say this, is that they might need to stay, they might be looking just for attention. So that's why they might be saying that. Never, ever assume that with any child talking about depression or suicide. If they are, as a parent, it's a responsibility to give them that. Or at least go through the steps, okay, after you get to a place of comfort and they feel secure enough to at least break free from that moment that they may have, ask them what that train of thought is. Why do you want to do this? What makes you feel this way? What caused you to have this problem? if there's something that you want to share with me, I will, and then for the parent to say, I will not be offended if there's something that you want to discuss with me that you feel is not going on at home. Break free from that, because it's not a vulnerable place for a parent. It's actually a vital place for a parent when you can open that door for a child in order for them to, feel like they can go to the parent. But again, Willis Knight, LSU, Brentwood, and if depression, mental health rehab is always important. There are multiple mental health agencies in the city that can help with that. And even in the process of waiting on that, like I said, remove, if they're thinking about suicidal thoughts and you have no possible way of getting them somewhere, call 911. Let them know what's going on. Let them know what's being attempted. Also, like I said, create a safe space for those people, both suicidal and depression. Yeah. Create a safe space. Get the tools again from remove social media if it's not happy, joy. Even though they may feel attached to it, so create something else. Let's spend this quality time doing this. Let's take an hour away from social and let's do this family-oriented thing. It could be me and you. Let's turn it to a movie night. Let's, if it's a girls, have a girl night. If it's a young man, spend some time with them, video games, basketball, whatever's goofy to kind of clear that up.
Sure.
And if the night gets long and they get ready to go to bed, love on them a little bit more, make sure they are okay, be kind of on your toes. They make it through the next day, then you're good. Get on the phone and call someone. Hey, my child is suffering with depression, yada, yada, yada. I don't know how to handle this. I've done all I can. Get that help ASAP in order for that to happen. That's about that. Yeah. I think that about covered it. I don't know if
I think you did. And listen, I want to thank you so much for tuning in and joining us on this conversation, Minister Derek, because this is a needed conversation. This is something that I know that we may not have the words to verbalize in our family. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. And to those who are watching and listening, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the We Build Families podcast. You can find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Also, the video link will be listed on YouTube as well. You can just search Brian Mitchell or We Build Families podcast, and you can download and subscribe to those channels as well. So again, thank you guys for tuning in. Remember, the strongest family is only strong based on the foundation that is built upon. Thank you again for tuning in, and we will see you next week.